Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzhak Reuven speaking to you from Jerusalem, Israel, the holy city of Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, the place of the Holy Temple, the place where God chose to rest His presence for all the world to partake of. Today is the 14th day of the Hebrew month of Sivan 5781. It's May 25th, 2021. This coming Shabbat, we are reading Parashat Beha'alotcha, which translates as when you kindle the lamps. We'll read that in just a moment. Beha'alotcha is Numbers 8:1, concluding with Numbers 12:16. We'll be talking all about the Parsha very soon. First, I want to mention that yesterday, if you were following the Temple Institute on Facebook, or even perhaps on Twitter, you would know that yesterday was the 30th anniversary of Mivtza Shlomo, the Operation Solomon, the airlift of 15,000 Ethiopian Jews over a 36-hour period from Ethiopia, from Addis Ababa to Israel, ending for those 15,000 Jews 2,500 years of exile, 2,500 years of longing for Jerusalem, and an amazing undertaking that Israel took upon itself. It was really the third major aliyah, the third major ingathering of Ethiopian Jewry that took place in the 80s and 90s. The first was, I think it was 1984, it was called Mivtza Moshe, Operation Moshe. That was when many Ethiopian Jews who had been living for centuries, millennia in northern Ethiopia were caught in a horrible famine, and they walked hundreds of miles from Ethiopia into Sudan, which was a country hostile to Israel at the time. Only recently, as part of the Abraham Accords, did we make peace with Sudan. And once they got to Sudan, they were put in refugee camps, and the Israeli Mossad, in a clandestine mission, brought many thousands of Ethiopian Jews that made it to Sudan into Israel. Many didn't make it. Many died along the way, many thousands. And in fact, there's the memorial day for the fallen who died along the way from Ethiopia to Sudan, on the way, on the long journey home to Jerusalem, to Israel. The memorial day actually takes place also on Jerusalem Day. And the following year, there was a secondary operation based on the same principle, I think, and that was called Operation Joshua, Mivtza Yoshua. And then, of course, 1991, this incredible airlift, 36 hours, I think it were 35 planes. If you look on our Facebook page, you have the exact details. You can look it up in Wikipedia. And in fact, Israel set a record for most passengers on a plane. They had, I think it was a jumbo plane, and they took out all the seats to fit more people. The idea was to get as many people out of Addis Ababa as quickly as possible, because the communist government of Mengistu at the time was falling. The rebels were about to enter into the city, and expecting the chaos that would ensue, Israel needed to do this very quickly. They finally were able to get the agreement of Mengistu to be able to land planes in Addis Ababa and fly the Jews out. I personally remember waking up. This was 1991. This was before internet, before personal computers, I think. And in Israel, we had radio, and we think we had one TV station. And so we'd wake up in the morning, my wife and I, and as we're getting the kids ready for school, we would turn on the radio to hear the news, and we hear this amazing news that planes are landing in Israel, in Ben Gurion Airport, with thousands of Ethiopian Jews. I turned on that one TV station to watch, and it was just a breathtaking moment to watch these tens, hundreds, thousands of people, plane after plane, coming down the plane, coming down the, the long ramp that you walk down out of the plane. Each and every one, as soon as they stepped on the land, on Eretz Yisrael, they kneeled down and kissed the land. Men, women, children, infants were born, babies were born on the plane. An amazing story. There's lots of video documentary footage of it on YouTube if you're interested. It's very, very moving, and it's fulfillment of prophecy. Isaiah, he prophesies that Israel will bring back its lost tribes, its dispersed from different lands, including Cush. And Cush is the biblical name for the land of Ethiopia and Sudan, which borders with Ethiopia. So yesterday, as I mentioned, was the 30th anniversary. Today there are, I think, about 150,000 Jews of Ethiopian ancestry in Israel. I think about 50,000 of them are born here. It is a growing community and a very beautiful community, and part of the prophetic ingathering, which is part of the whole program. As I wrote in the post yesterday, this is also part of building the Holy Temple. We bring in our gathered, and that ingathering, part of the prophecy, is part and parcel of the building of the Holy Temple. Right now, as I'm speaking, there are a few hundreds of B'nai Menashe, Jews coming across from India. I'll be landing in Israel soon to make Aliyah, and that's been an ongoing project, bringing thousands of this B'nai Menashe, descendants of the lost tribe of Menashe, that made it all the way to the northeastern corner of India, and now they're on their way back. It's exciting times, prophetic times. Last week, as we did Temple Talk, I believe we were still in a hot war with Hamas. They were still firing missiles into Israel, and Israel was still counterattacking. That ended. I don't think there has been any kind of official ceasefire or any kind of written agreement or arrangement, but both sides have agreed, it seems, through third parties to put an end to the hostilities. Of course, Israel was ready to put an end to the hostilities the moment that Hamas stopped targeting innocent Israeli civilians with missiles. And of course, this 11-day war set off basically pogroms here in Israel, in which Israeli Arabs went on a rampage, burning synagogues, firebombing Jewish apartments and houses, attacking Jews in cars, attacking Jews on the street. And this apparently inspired very many supporters of Hamas, alleged supporters of the Palestinians, many of the progressive people throughout the world and in America, United States, who picked up on the vibe and began attacking Jews all across Europe, United States, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, I believe, other major cities all over, doing horrible things, saying horrible things, and of course the fuel was being fed by the Squad, these members, Democratic members of United States Congress, who were accusing Israel of everything from apartheid to genocide to deliberately killing innocent Arab children and ethnic cleansing, etc., etc., saying it without apology and whipping up people into a frenzy, people who probably didn't need too much of a whipping up, and gangs. organized gangs, funded gangs of people who call themselves supporters of the Palestinians. If you support Hamas, you're not supporting the Palestinians. I hate to tell you that. Hamas is a terrorist organization dedicated, and they state this night and day, and they state it just this week, again, for the umpteenth time, dedicated to the destruction of Israel as a Jewish state and to the murder, annihilation, genocide of every Jew in the land of Israel. And if that's not all, of the destruction of the Jewish people throughout the world. That is their stated goal. There's nowhere in their protocols, nowhere in their platform, the betterment of Palestinians. They hold the people in Gaza as hostage. Human shields and hostages. That's the way it is. You support Hamas, you're supporting a terrorist organization that is funded and fed and armed in various ways by Iran, whose raison d'etre, the regime's raison d'etre is to destroy Israel and take over the world, impose Sharia law upon the entire world. This is Hamas. This is who you are, all you Hollywood stars and you pop stars and you top models and intellectuals and university professors, etc., etc. This is who you're supporting. Now, it may be a cover to say that you are, defending or supporting the Palestinians, but it's a ruse because, it's a ruse because Hamas has no interest in bettering the lives of a single Palestinian other than their own ilk, who their leaders live in mansions outside of Gaza, and the ones inside Gaza live in mansions inside Gaza. They're the ones who have protection. They're the ones who have money. You're not kidding anyone. And when your anti-Israel screed in times of war, as this was, are easily flipped into kill the Jews, the Jews, bleep the Jews, rape the Jews, it's pretty clear where you're coming from. Now, it took Joe Biden about 2 weeks to finally step up and say anti-Semitism is despicable and has to stop. I give him credit for saying it. It took him a long time. And once he said it, some other very bold members of the Democratic Party also came out and condemned anti-Semitism. They didn't mention the anti-Semitism being spoken and incited by their own Democratic Congress members. They haven't taken on those people yet. They're afraid of them. But they did come out. Joe Biden, I give him credit, he said it. He didn't say it's bad to be anti-Semitic and it's also bad to be Islamophobic, which is what some other people said, which is really beside the point. That wasn't the issue. Attacks against Jews, violent attacks, violent verbal attacks, violent physical attacks against Jews in America, as well as in Europe, is many, many times higher than violent verbal or violent physical attacks against any other ethnic group, any other minority, any other religion around the world. And it ramped up hundreds of times over the past 2 weeks. So, who are you kidding? When Donald Trump, didn't state his condemnation of racism strongly enough, boldly enough, quickly enough, repeatedly enough, boy, was he put on a spit and roasted by the media. But the media here is silent. In fact, the media is part of the incitement. Read the New York Times. No, don't read the New York Times. It's sick. It's sick what they report and claim to be news. But the AP, Associated Press, is offended because Israel took down a building that they had their offices in Gaza. Little did they know, little did they know that right next to their offices in the same building were military headquarters of Hamas. Little did they know. No wonder they report such wonderful things about Hamas in Gaza. Little did they know they were in the same building. And they're very offended. Israel took down their offices. I could go on and on. I think you're getting my message. I hope you're getting my message. I hope, and I think I'm probably talking to the choir, but it's still, we all need reminding. And I have to tell you that even though the overt hostilities have ended between Israel and Hamas, there is still a lot of violence in Judea, Samaria. Just in Jerusalem, just yesterday, 2 civilians, actually 1 soldier and a civilian, were stabbed by a Palestinian terrorist in the train stop where I get on the train or the bus whenever I commute in and out of Jerusalem. And the Temple Mount, again, we've been sharing videos from the Temple Mount, has, in the evenings when the Jews aren't allowed up and the police presence is at a minimum, if at all, but gangs of Palestinians go up, and there's now started with verbal, now physical confrontations between the supporters of Hamas and the supporters of Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian Authority president, whose presidential term ended 15 years ago. As you know, he recently called for elections, hoping that it would cozy him up to the Biden administration and other donors and supporters in the West. And then he called off the elections when it became clear to him more than ever that he was going to lose to Hamas. And so this is what this is really all about. Hamas saw an opportunity to raise its head and take over the streets, as they say, in Judea, Samaria. And so that's what this whole war was about. And so it's just the beginning of a internecine war, a civil war between the Hamas supporters and the Fatah supporters. Fatah is the PLO faction that Mahmoud Abbas, otherwise known as Abu Mazen, heads. And it's just going to lead to warfare between the two groups in Judea, Samaria, which of course is going to spill over into Israel, and of course is going to become Israel's problem if it happens. Israel already has been arresting hundreds of Hamas activists and terror cells all through Judea and Samaria over the past week in anticipation of this, and to stop this, nip this in the bud. Israel also, the police have been, I've read that they've arrested over 1,500 Israeli Arabs for the violence that took place throughout the first initial days of the war, and still continuing to some extent in cities like Akko and Lud. So that's where we're at right now. Here in Israel. Other than that, everything's great. Soon they'll probably be lifting the last of the coronavirus restrictions. There's not much left of the restrictions because that's pretty much in our rearview mirror. People are beginning to travel again, in and out of the country. And, as I said before, it's all part of the prophecy. It's all been written in the book, and it's all happening now, and it moves fast. You gotta be on your toes here. Things happen very, very fast. So this week's Parashat Beha'alotcha, again, it begins in chapter 8, book of Numbers, chapter 8, verse 1. Let's read the first verse in Hebrew, then in English. Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, daber el Aharon va'amata elav beha'alotcha et hanerot el mul pnei ha-menorah ya'iru shivat hanerot. Vayas ken Aharon el mul pnei ha-menorah he'ala nerotea ka'asher tziva Hashem et Moshe. I actually read the first 3 verses. Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and say to him, when you kindle the lamps," in Hebrew that is Beha'alotcha et hanerot, "when you kindle the lamps toward the face of the menorah, shall the 7 lamps cast light." Aaron did so toward the face of the menorah. He kindled its lamps as Hashem had commanded Moshe. The word Beha'alotcha literally means to lift up, to raise up. So in a literal interpretation, it means to cause the flames to rise up, to kindle. That's why it's translated. It's to kindle the lamps of the menorah. But the word, the Hebrew word, the simpler word to kindle is lahadlik, to ignite. Beha'alotcha means in your raising up. And that's Aaron's job, to raise up the lights of the menorah, to raise up the lights of the Holy Temple, and to raise Am Yisrael up, to raise the people up. And we are all, part of our mission in life is to lift up the world, ourselves included, to raise it up in holiness, to raise it up to Hashem by doing Hashem's work, by doing what Hashem has commanded us. That's the beauty, that's the purpose, that's the in Hebrew the tachlis, the tachlit, the purpose, the end game of doing the commandments, which is to raise us ourselves up, raise our surroundings up in order to be closer to Hashem. And then it says in verse 3, Aaron did so. Commentators say, why does, it was clear he did it. Why does it re-emphasize that he did so? And it's to say that he did just as Moshe commanded, just as God commanded through Moshe. Aaron did so. He didn't, do an extra flourish. He didn't do, less than he was asked or more. He did exactly, precisely as he was commanded to do. And that's the beauty of what he did. And there's also a beautiful midrash. It says that Aaron was a little bit despondent. Remember that at the end of last week's Parashat Naso, we read about the 12 tribal leaders, each of whom brought gifts and offerings to the tabernacle. And Aaron was the leader of the tribe of Levi. And he wasn't asked to bring a gift or to bring offerings. And he felt a little despondent, like, wow, I also want to do something. I also want to represent my tribe, my clan, my family, and be represented, be counted before Hashem. So Moshe tells to Aaron, this is your task. You're going to light the menorah. And of course, we're right back where we've been so many times before in our reading of the 5 books, which right back in that first day of the first month of Nisan, and this, of course, is the second Nisan in the desert. The first Nisan in the desert was when Israel left Egypt. And in that first year, Israel built the tabernacle, and it was dedicated on the first day of the first month, that's Nisan, of the second year in the wilderness, Bamidbar, which just happens to be the name of the book we're reading, Bamidbar, in the wilderness, and of course known in English as Numbers. From that beautiful opening, very inspiring, very uplifting, literally uplifting opening of the Parashat Beha'alotcha, we go on to a description of the dedication, of the preparation, of the inauguration, of the sanctification of the Levites, of the offerings that they'll make. And again, Shem points out once again that these Levites represent the firstborn of all the children of Israel, who were the original Kohanim, the original priests, the firstborns, but when God brought Israel out of Egypt and killed the firstborn of the Egyptians and saved the firstborn of the Israelites, he then does this transfer. And so the tribe of Levi, which proved its dedication and steadfastness with Hashem, certainly the incident of the golden calf, recall, that tribe stood with Moshe and defended God's honor. So once again, we talk about the dedication of the Levites in this week's parasha, and following that, a short account once again of the completion of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, and how it's filled with the kavod, the glory of Hashem, and how at night there is a pillar of fire that reaches up from it toward heaven, and toward the day there is the cloud of glory. And then we learn about the traveling instructions. Okay, everything's set up. The tabernacle's ready. It's been inaugurated. We talked earlier in the book of Numbers about the encampments of all the tribes, where they were positioned, and the circumference around the tabernacle, and who their leaders were, and how they would go out to war. And now we learn about traveling when. It's very beautiful. Very beautiful. It says here. In fact, I'm going to read from Numbers 9, verse 15. On the day the tabernacle was set up, the cloud covered the tabernacle that was a tent for the testimony. And in the evening there would be upon the tabernacle like a fiery appearance until morning. So it would always be. The cloud would cover it, and an appearance of fire at night. And whenever the cloud was lifted from atop the tent, afterwards the children of Israel would journey. And in the place where the cloud would rest, there the children of Israel would encamp. Okay, so now we're learning how Israel moved forward towards its destination, toward the land of Israel, the promised land. According to the word of Hashem would the children of Israel journey, and according to the word of Hashem would they encamp. All the days that the cloud would rest upon the tabernacle, they would encamp. When the cloud lingered upon the tabernacle many days, the children of Israel would maintain the charge of Hashem and would not journey. Sometimes the cloud would be upon the tabernacle for a number of days. According to the word of Hashem would they encamp, and according to the word of Hashem would they journey. And sometimes the cloud would remain from evening until morning, and the cloud would be lifted in the morning, and they would journey. Or for a day and a night, and the cloud would be lifted, and they would journey. Or for 2 days, or a month, or a year, when the cloud would linger over the tabernacle, resting upon it, the children of Israel would encamp and would not journey, but when it was lifted, they would journey. So it's all Hashem's will. And Hashem makes his will visible to Israel. And Israel travels when Hashem says to travel, and Israel encamps when Hashem says to encamp. According to the word of Hashem would they encamp, and according to the word of Hashem would they journey. The charge of Hashem would they safeguard, according to the word of Hashem through Moshe. And then Hashem instructs Moshe to fashion silver trumpets for the Kohanim to blow. And again, it's just so beautiful. Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, make for yourselves 2 silver trumpets, make them hammered out. Right? They're one piece of silver hammered out, and they shall be yours for the summoning of the assembly and to cause the camps to journey. When they sound a long blast with them, the entire assembly shall assemble to you, to the entrance of the tent of meeting. If they sound a long blast with one, the leaders shall assemble to you, the heads of Israel's thousands. When you sound short blasts, the camps resting to the east shall journey. When you sound short blast a second time, the camps resting to the south shall journey. Short blasts shall they sound for their journeys. When you gather together the congregation, you shall sound a long blast, but not a short blast. The sons of Aaron, the Kohanim, shall sound the trumpets, and it shall be for you an eternal decree for your generations. When you go to wage war in your land against an enemy who oppresses you, you shall sound short blasts of the trumpets, and you shall be recalled before Hashem, your God, and you shall be saved from your foes. It's so beautiful. We're so privileged that Torah shares this with us. This is how they traveled in the desert. We're going to learn how it's going to happen real soon. This is like a watershed parsha. There's a divide in this parsha. The Dickens phrase from Great Expectations. They were the best of times, they were the worst of times. We're in the best of times right now. There is a a division in this week's Parsha, which we're about to get to, where everything goes south, where things start to fall apart. And that's going to kind of be the way it's going to be throughout the rest of the book of Numbers until the concluding chapters of the book of Numbers. We're about to start to read about all the travails, all the pitfalls, all the downfalls, all the problems that Israel is going to encounter, that Israel is going to cause along the way. But right now, for the moment, it's just beautiful. It couldn't get better, right? It couldn't get better than this. They have the manna. They're traveling when God says to travel. They rest when God says to rest. They have these silver trumpets with blast out signals. They know who's to move first and who's to move second. It's all clockwork. It's beautiful. And it's all al pi Hashem. It's all according to Hashem's word. Wow, that is a way to live. That is the way to live. I left out one part of this order of events that I've been talking about, and that is Pesach Sheni. That is Second Passover. I just left it out. I'm going to go back to it now. And of course, we've talked about it before. Second Passover is 1 month after the original Passover. The original Passover, of course, is the 15th, the 14th, and the 15th of Nisan. So the second Passover is the 15th of Iyar. And that, of course, we read in this week's Parsha, the famous passage where some men went to Moshe and said, we need a second, right? We know it's the second Nisan of the second, it's Nisan of the second year, so we're coming up to Passover. So men go to Moshe and say, we're impure. We can't bring an offering, but we want to. What are we supposed to do? It's not fair. Moshe says, good question. Let me ask Hashem. Hashem says, yes, by all means. If you're impure because of contact with a corpse, with a dead body, and you don't have time to become pure, you need to be pure in order to bring your offering to the tabernacle or later on to the holy temple, then you'll have to wait and do it a second time, 1 month later. Also, if you're on the way, it adds this here, even though it's sort of a prescription for the future, because they were very close to the tabernacle in the desert. Nobody was too far away in the desert. But in the future, people would be too far away, and they might get stuck along the way. They're on the way to Jerusalem, but they don't quite make it. Then they can bring the offering, the Passover offering, 1 month later. If you didn't bother, to go to Jerusalem, you're not off the hook. You face the punishment of karet, which is to be cut off from your people, or to be cut off, your soul is cut off from Hashem, which is usually understood meaning that you are going to suffer an untimely death. There are 2 positive commandments which have this consequence if they are not fulfilled, and one is the Passover offering, and the other is circumcision. In any case, moving right along, we read in Numbers chapter 10 and verse 11, it was in the second year, in the second month, on the 20th of the month, the cloud was lifted from upon the tabernacle of the testimony. The children of Israel journeyed on their journeys from the wilderness of Sinai, and the cloud rested in the wilderness of Paran. And then it talks about how the different camps all, left at their appointed times in order to advance. And of course, as we know from a previous reading in the book of Numbers, it was time for the Levites, each with their special assignment, to disassemble the tabernacle and then to reassemble it upon arriving at the destination. Wow. So much more to talk about. We've run out of time. I might continue this next week because it'll lead into next week's Parsha. So much more to talk about, and I don't have time to get there today. Thank you so much for being with me. Temple Talk.